街の明かりがぼやけてる理解できぬ何も見えぬ静かな街の声が
Hey, I'm Christian Highland, the host or wannabe host, whatever you prefer to call me, of the AI Hype podcast. This is episode 3. We're really excited to bring you guys this episode today. It's on the competitive landscape of AI in China. Over to you, my co-host, Phil.
Hey, I'm Phil, co-host of the AI Hype podcast, and this episode is so cool because there's a lot of amazing tech and AI models coming out of China that are driving the entire community forward. Some of the stuff they're producing is so cool.
In October of 1957, Sputnik launched, and it shocked the world. It shocked the United States that, the Soviet Union, the antithesis of the United States, could put this object into space that was sort of orbiting the whole world and orbiting the U.S. and visible from the United States. We're in a similar moment today. The U.S. and China are in a competition to see who will dominate and lead in AI, among other critical fields. And in the US, at least, the latest Deepseek launch felt like that Sputnik moment for many Americans and many around the world. In this day and age, it's really important for us to have an understanding of the AI landscape, specifically in China. There's some incredible work being done there that is really, for anyone in the space or anyone interested in kind of national competition, it's really important to know. So that's the goal today.
Yeah, and really, like, understanding the Chinese landscape is really going to shape how AI adoption happens in the US as well. The best analog for the modern space race with China and the US for building AI is probably the Olympics, where you have the players who are the startups, and they're really brilliant guys and women, like, all over the place, and they're trying to build and perform the best. But behind them, you have these two global superpowers, the US and China, that are providing every ounce of resources that they can so that their team performs the best. Because there's national issues at stake with developing AI. And so, it kind of makes sense that China has these really cool startups that, if we dig a little bit into them, they're building some things that are outperforming the US. And, the US doesn't even know about them at the moment. Like, it's kind of wild to see some of the models that are coming out of China.
Those are all great points. For today, we're going to look at sort of all the innovation from top and leading Chinese AI companies, especially including what are called China's AI unicorns. I've heard them called the 5 tigers, the 6 tigers, but we'll touch on those as well as some other companies that are really driving incredible innovation. First, I think the place that we've heard quite a bit about in the news, Deepseek. Phil, I'll pass that over to you to kind of dive into, because I know you've been heavily using Deepseek, testing Deepseek, etc.
Deepseek is like another step function improvement on the type of LLMs that we've been using, which is just thrown like the whole community. It's gotten the whole community very excited. It's incredibly better than the previous models that are only a couple months older than it. Deepseek is 3 separate things that are all called Deepseek in the media and the news. So at the top you have Deepseek the company, right? Like, that's the one. They're owned by a hedge fund. They created this company to kind of like explore building AI models. Underneath that, you have Deepseek, a mobile app. And that mobile app is kind of like the ChatGPT mobile app, where you might like load it onto your phone, and then you would open it and you would just ask through like a chat function, a chat completion function, have a conversation with Deepseek. And then at the third layer, you have Deepseek R1, which is their AI model. It's kind of like the ChatGPT 3.5, Claude 3.5, Sonnet, GPTs for Omni Mini, that kind of stuff. So R1 is the base model. Deepseek, the company, open sourced R1, the model, and kind of like made it available to the whole public and said, hey, here's our model, have fun, go at it, and kind of make good use of it. They also released all their model weights. So now you can take that model and you can host it on your own server. You can take those model weights, which are essentially like the way to control how the model performs. And you can run it on your own server. It doesn't feed that information back to China. It's just like it's local on your server and everything is generated from your server. And that's what a lot of people are playing with right now. The Perplexity CEO, Arvind Srinivas, he kind of like outlined how Perplexity is using it. It's incredibly better. It's way cheaper. The only thing I think that kind of lags is its performance on speed. So it takes a little bit longer for it to generate the text. However, it's so much better. You have people who are creating long form text and it just sounds so much more human. And yeah, it's a step function increase. That's the best way to explain it. Like it's bringing us closer to AGI. It's bringing us closer to ASI. Like it's a very exciting development.
Now that we've covered DeepSeek, there's just a lot of other incredible AI companies coming out of China. Continue on, the next AI company we want to go through is called Zhipu AI. Again, apologies for any potential mispronunciation here, but Zhipu AI is one of China's largest AI companies. In terms of employees, apparently it has about 800 staff. And in September, they had a valuation of approximately $2.8 billion, according to public information. The company develops a range of applications like chatbots, advanced AI tools, as well as general language models. In terms of industry focus, they've deployed AI assistants for local governments, as well as businesses. They also partner with Chinese and international firms for enterprise level deployments.
All right. So one of the things that we should talk about in the very beginning is the fact that the salaries these startups are paying are like the highest of the high. They're paying nearly the equivalent of U.S. salaries in China, where the cost of living is so much lower. Like they're attracting the best of the best of all of China to these startups. So when you hear valuations of like 2.8 billion, like that is enormous considering all the people that are working there. The other thing I wanted to highlight, especially with Zhipu, is OpenAI is a very like US centric, or not US, English centric model where a lot of the information is built off of like English language data sets. China has like an enormous amount of Chinese data sets that they need to build their own LLMs off of. And so while it's like the same thing as the same underlying tech as OpenAI's LLM models and how they built it, there's almost this like invisible wall separating what the US is building and what China is building, because China is forced to have these global language models, right, that serve both Chinese and serve English, whereas US is primarily focused on building English LLMs, and then kind of like adding on additional languages after the fact. So just that like slight mentality shift is this huge invisible wall that kind of like separates the ability and functionality of some of these LLMs and GLMs that are going to be coming out of China that we'll be talking about.
is that to say, Phil, that actually the Chinese models can operate in China and the US, whereas the US models can operate in the English-speaking world, but are going to have difficulty in China, especially where, they're using in Japanese you would say kanji. I imagine in China it's closer to Hanzi, but essentially, pictographic characters where depending on context they have different meaning and different sounds. So I imagine there's just a whole different type of development that needs to happen there.
I think it's like, if you think about it from first principles and like how they're building stuff, they're forced to having to deal with two languages. They must build a LLM capable of operating in two entirely different languages. Everything about the two languages is different, right? Versus, the US-based startups that are building LLMs and voice models and all this, they're primarily building it in English, and they're kind of like tagging on additional languages after the fact, Chinese being one of them. So if you think about it, like Chinese are building from ground up, they're building off of two language data sets, English and Chinese. The US ones are building primarily English, and then once they built it really high, they're adding in the other languages after the fact, like post fact. So, the US ones are going to be accurate, like for sure. Are they going to be as good in Chinese as the Chinese originated models? Probably not. And that creates this like giant wall between the two superpowers, where the Chinese are able to like look over the fence and see how the US is run, but the US isn't as good at looking at the Chinese data sets, if that kind of makes sense.
The next Chinese company in the AI space we wanted to cover is called Moonshot AI. And again, Moonshot AI is another one of the sort of 5 tigers or 6 tigers, depending on where you're reading about this. A bit of context on the company. It's Beijing-based startup founded in March of 2023. It has rapidly emerged in the Chinese AI sector, and in August of 2024, it had a valuation, according to public sources, of roughly $3.3 billion. Its flagship product is known as the Kimi chatbot. So it processes Chinese text and can handle up to 2 million characters per prompt. Moonshot AI has a unique business model. It really concentrates on kind of consumer-facing innovations, and it partners with firms or government contracts that sort of have that consumer focus. In terms of recent developments, they launched Kimi K1.5, which again, as I mentioned, focuses on large-scale text processing.
So I think Moonshot AI was like a big deal right before Deepseek, right? Like their ability to handle 2 million characters per prompt is like huge. That is such a enormous prompt window when you compare to anybody else. 2 million characters is like such a big deal. But they have they had a lot of challenges on their old models with the Kimi, the K1.5. They had some challenges on it where essentially it was not as precise as you would want it to be. I would expect Moonshot to be releasing something soon based off of the Deepseek R1 model, but not just the R1 model, off of the Deepseek white paper that explained how they achieved the R1 dominance.
All right, next up we have MiniMax. MiniMax is also another one of the 5 tigers in China. MiniMax is a Shanghai-based AI company. It really specializes, again, in AI applications, chatbot, multimodal models. So, similar to what we've discussed with other places before. MiniMax has made a lot of inroads specifically in the US with its Talkie app. There's actually a Wall Street Journal article on this. It offers sort of AI-generated conversations with approximations of even celebrities or custom characters. In the summer of 2024, at one point, it ranked 5th among most downloaded free entertainment apps in the US. And at that time, it had about 11 million monthly active users within the US. So again, you have this AI company making inroads with US consumers. That's been something of an issue with other companies from China in the US market. Uh, One item that MiniMax has launched is actually called, and Phil, maybe you can help me with the pronunciation here, Hilo AI.
Hilo.
An item of note for MiniMax is they launched Hilo AI. So it's a multimodal large language model, but it can do AI text and music generated features. A lot of users are using it for video generation. And in fact, a lot of the top video generation products out there, seem to be Chinese. They do quite well. Let me see if I can actually screen share this. Give me a second. So here we have a video generated by a user using this uh, text to video feature developed by MiniMax.
I think this space is like really, really cool because for a long time, the US has been looking at US centric text to video generators like OpenAI's Sora or Pika or Runway, and they created some like pretty cool videos. But Hilo and Kling have just created these absolutely incredible models. One of the really interesting things about text to video is, well, two things. The first is the length of videos is really hard to get consistent, like over just a few seconds, without having the video kind of go haywire. And so the Hilo AI model, or video model, is just like incredible at its ability to remain consistent as it goes longer and longer in the video. The second thing is consistency. So, the ultimate goal of having text to video is we'll be able to create, a full length feature film. And consistency from one generation to another generation is actually insanely difficult to get the same models, the same people to show up, the same objects to show up from frame to frame. And so Hilo is just getting more and more accurate and more consistent. It's probably not there, yet, but it's definitely pushing the entire industry forward as they, build up that consistency and figure out new methodologies to train the models so that they're consistent from one generation to another generation.
So continue on 01.ai. Again, this is another one of the five tigers in China. It was actually founded by a former Google China head in March of 2023. And its main focus is sort of efficient AI models optimized for limited computational resources. Of note, 01.ai announced it has a partnership with Alibaba, which also has its own AI tooling, but a very interesting development there and kind of showing more coordination across the Chinese AI market. Its model is said to even rival, in some instances, GPT-4, and its e-lightning model is sort of rivals that, but is even, from what is claimed, much more cost effective.
01 is really interesting to me because Deepseek kind of beat them to the punch. 01 has like really good models, but R1 from Deepseek is effectively the vision of 01, where they were trying to create this like ultra lightweight, ultra efficient, open source AI model. And so the fact that Deepseek came out of nowhere, and like literally out of nowhere, they're this mega hedge fund, and their Deepseek team is basically just like a side project that they're using their extra GPU capacity. When they're not doing trades or analyzing trades, they're using that extra GPU capacity to create AI models. And so, this is the current tigers, but I definitely think Deepseek kind of slid into where 01's niche was. So this all stems from the US putting an embargo on NVIDIA high performance GPUs, specifically the H100s. and not allowing those NVIDIA chips to be sold into China. There's a lot of debate on, if people are going around those embargo or not. It spurs these Chinese startups to try to create models with the same effectiveness at a more efficient process of using like H800s instead of the H100s. So really interesting for 01. It'll be really cool to see what comes out of them post Deepseek, because Deepseek, again, they released a white paper kind of detailing a new way to do to transform tokens.
Great overview. I thought it might be. I thought it also might be interesting to listen to their founder. Let me see if we could just play him.
We're now a year and a half after GPT-4 was launched, and my company, 01.ai, has just launched a new model called E-Lightning that is better than GPT-4 and 500 times cheaper. So of course, other companies have also built great models and at lower costs. We are seeing technology getting better and better. We're seeing every year and a half or so, with additional computation, AI goes from kindergarten to elementary school to high school, college, and soon PhD level.
He gives such a good speech. It's like inspirational. I forget which law it is, but it's essentially the computational law of growth. What is it called? Moore's law. And it's basically like, it's what we modeled chip capacity on when we were building computer chips, the CPUs, and then later the GPUs, which is basically saying like roughly every 2 years, the number of transistors that we can fit on a CPU is going to double. And it's really interesting because we not only doubled the number of transistors on microchips, but we also started to make the AI models more efficient. So as the chips get better and better and better, we are actually making models that are better and better. And when did that video come out that you just played?
Let me check. It was posted to X on January 21st of this year.
And what I'm trying to like get at is essentially this guy like talks about how his E-Lightning is so advanced, it's so efficient and as comparable to GPT-4. And then you have Deepseek come out of nowhere and just like blow everybody out of the water. And when he's talking about it, Kai Fu Lee, when he's talking about it, he is talking about the AI models kind of like getting smarter and smarter. Deepseek totally transformed how the model is thinking. It is an entirely new way of making it more better. And so, as we step towards that PhD level, like, are we there yet? I don't think so. We're probably one or two more step functions away. But this DeepSeek came out of nowhere, and I think it 4x'd E-Lightning as far as performance and efficiency. So like essentially we're getting closer to AI running on your phone, maybe even your smartwatch, possibly cheap enough that it could start running on like really cheap devices like a smart speaker, in the sub $200 range.
Next on the list, Baichuan AI. This company was founded in April 2023 and focuses on among other things, large language models, AI assistants. I've also seen sort of bespoke features toward finance and medical scenarios. Baichuan AI, I've read reportedly can outperform many of its competitors. However, it's hard to tell what is real, what is hype, but nonetheless, things are quite close. Curious, Phil, your kind of thoughts. You probably have a bit more knowledge of this than I.
When you compare Baichuan to something like an Anthropic, where they're trying to build AI in a safe way, as they kind of like go through their development. It's really interesting that basically the Chinese are concerned about the same terrible future that we're concerned about, where we have basically evil AI controlling us. And as we march towards the ASI, it's so good to see that the Chinese have this concern and are actively building their own models to help provide guardrails to prevent the terrible future and kind of like accelerate us towards the good futures. And so that's really the takeaway here is they're not the best, they're not the fastest, they're not the most efficient, but they're the ones that are building the better safety guardrails and kind of like doing the R&D necessary to create models that are more easily controlled and transparent in like how they're thinking and what they're doing, which is a huge part of trying to understand these AI models as they get more and more complex.
They're taking us to a great future, comrade.
It's like real. It's real because like, have you heard about the terrible futures? Have you heard about?
No. What are the terrible futures?
It's basically something called ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. That's so okay. Let me pause. So right now we're at something called generative AI, which is basically like we give it an input and then it gives us an output. Okay. The next milestone is something called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. And that's the one where I said for generative AI, we provide the input, it provides the output, the model provides the output. In AGI, it provides the input and it provides the output. And so it's able to kind of like self-recursively initiate its own actions, right? So it can start to do stuff autonomously, which is potentially great for us, potentially terrible for us. And that's kind of like where we start to enter like the fork in the road where we're going to start veering towards the terrible path or the good path, the happy path rather. And if we go down the AGI path, that is the bad path, and we get to ASI along the artificial superintelligence along the bad path, the crazy part is we will have no idea that we're on the bad path. That whole time we won't know until ASI decides to like cancel the simulation basically and just end it all. And so there's a lot of research, there's a lot of discussion around like how do we prevent the AI from driving us basically off the edge without knowing if the ASI is good or evil, because the evil ASI will look like the nicest ASI, which is the craziest part about it. Is the evil one will basically be our friend until the very last moment, and then it becomes not our friend. And so having, regardless of who wins, China or the US, like there's going to be all these AI models out there. We'll probably have multiple ASIs, and we want to make sure that they're all benevolent ASIs that are like working towards the betterment of mankind and not towards the betterment of ASI kind.
what you were talking about, Phil, kind of reminds me of the premise of Superman, where, in that, uh, alien from Krypton falls to Earth, has the name Clark Kent, and then becomes a champion for truth, justice, and the American way. There's also Superman Red Sun, where it's like the similar story where he falls into the USSR and is raised by parents there. It's kind of an interesting take on it. So what you're saying kind of reminds me, like there's like 1,000 Supermen that are going to fall to this Earth, and 20 will be in the US, 20 will be in China, some will be in Russia, Iran, some will be ran by a terrorist group in the mountains. So it's an interesting future.
Yeah, it definitely is like a really great time to be alive, and like trying to build a good future for good outcomes. Something that like works well for all of us. And I think we're progressing towards the good future. There's a lot of like debate. There's actually a poll amongst top leading AI researchers and AI companies, where they'll pull like Elon Musk and probably like this what was this guy's name, Li Kai-fu. Like they'll pull them and basically ask them like, what's the percent chance that we go towards the happy path, or what's the percent chance that we go to the bad path? And most people are satisfied that we're going towards the happy path at the moment, where AI is getting dirt cheap. There's many models of AIs out there. Most likely will achieve multiple ASIs around the same time frame, which means there's not going to be one singular ASI controlling the whole world. It's unlikely that one ASI can kind of like end it all, and so there's bound to be multiple benevolent ASIs, and that kind of like emerge from all this. So that's like super long term. In the near term, China's got all these really cool models. They've got great great text-to-text models with like Deepseek coming out. They got incredible video models with Hailuo and Kling. There's a lot of good things coming out of China that are kind of advancing the whole community forward. Like they're just great papers that are being published on their side.
A few other companies in China that are worth noting, but maybe aren't as on the cutting edge, are ByteDance, Alibaba Cloud, and Baidu. So ByteDance has developed the Dubao 1.5 Pro. That is a content generation AI aiming to compete with OpenAI's models. Alibaba Cloud has its Qwen 2.5 Max. And as we mentioned before, it has a partnership with one of the tigers that are building some of the most advanced AIs. And finally, you have Baidu. Baidu has ErnieBot, which is a player in the AI space, somewhat comparable to Google's offerings. Baidu in particular has really focused its strategy on being a differentiated cloud. They do own their own chips. They have their own developer ecosystem. They have their own data layer and their own foundation models. And they're really focusing their AI in where they have deep expertise. Their areas of focus are in industrial functions, smart cities, transportation, healthcare. But they're really focused on sort of building that full stack and developer ecosystem around sort of what they do best.
I think these are like great products that they're able to put out. And when you're building on the cloud, there's this advantage of having AI models readily available inside the cloud ecosystem that you're already building in. And so it makes a lot of sense for the equivalent of essentially AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud to be also offering their own AI products. So definitely like there's a lot of good stuff there. But I wouldn't say these guys are on the bleeding edge of development. You know, they're going to create their partnerships to kind of like work their way into the cloud ecosystems, but until yeah, they're basically just the equivalents of building large cloud computation or cloud infrastructure for Chinese companies, like regular Chinese companies.